Introduction like that, I don't even need to talk. It's obvious I'm wonderful. And that's the first time I've ever been introduced as a commodity. My name is Don, and I am an alcoholic. I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing today. My home group is the Denver Thursday night group. You may not have noticed it, but institution people just get all emotional, so just put up with it. We are day by day, almost every day, faced with the life and death issue of Alcoholics Anonymous. By the grace of God, and because I have done everything you have suggested I do, the way you suggested I do it, it has not been necessary for me to have a drink or a pill or a fix since December 26th of 1967. And for that, I'm very grateful. And I don't say that to impress you. It impresses the hell out of me. But how many of you here are fairly new to our little old fellowship here, under a year? Okay? I want you to know something before you hear something different. You don't ever have to drink again. Relapse is not part of recovery. It will happen, but you don't have to do it. I'm extremely glad to be here for a number of reasons. Now, again, for you new folks, before we get lost in what I'm here to do, let me tell you some of the real reasons I'm here. The truth I've learned. This is about the people in this room. I have been living with a consciousness of the presence of God, where I am, He is, for 27 years. And I'm still learning from that. But it's about the people in this room. About a year ago, 14 months as a matter of fact, when I wake up, since you introduced me to God, God's there. That's the first thing I talk to. 14 months ago at 6 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and it wasn't there. I was not aware. And I don't know why, but it didn't frighten me. I just quickly began to pray, which you'll understand. If there's nothing there, who am I praying to? And the prayer was very simple. I need to know you're here. I need to know you better, and I need to be closer to you. And my phone rang. A fellow named Billy. He said, look, I was 7 years sober last week and I drank. And my friend Alan was 12 years sober last week and he drank. And I come from an old tradition that came from Mac Cheater. What we do is sit down with you if we sponsor you and we read the big book to you because we know your main problem is you can't read. Okay. And we go through that entire process together. We do it with you. Everything just the way it says. And as a result of that, Mac found and I found people don't drink again. And Billy said, I understand you do these where you'll sit down with a big book with people, particularly with slippers. And I said, yeah, that's true, Billy. He said, will you do that for us? That doesn't make me a guru. I'm one of those people that's a big book fanatic. You just have to live with that. And I started to get dressed and my phone rang. There was another call, and I started to get dressed again, and my phone rang. And before I got to work, I got the message loud and clear. If you would know me better, know my kids better. If you would get closer to me, get closer to my children. So I want to thank the committee and everybody who brought me down here. But I really want to thank you for coming. See, if you weren't here, I've got the kind of ego, I'd make this talk anyway. Oh, hell yeah. So is CD, we know what we're doing. But because you're here, my life has meaning. I have to tell you I'm particularly delighted with some of the folks. I have never been anywhere in Alcoholics Anonymous, anywhere. And I've been around the world. But I haven't encountered someone that I met before. When my wife and I were in Osaka, Japan, for goodness sakes, two fellows came up to us and through an interpreter reminded me we had met on Oahu 4 years before that. And I get here and my friend Leo's here. And all kinds of people. You see, when I started this journey, nobody wanted to talk to me or have anything to do with me. And they were absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I'm an alcoholic who literally destroyed everything worthwhile in my life. And I couldn't even find you. I didn't even come looking for you. And I have to tell you the truth. Alcoholics Anonymous did not get me sober. God got me sober December 26th of 1967, and 5 months later brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. That means I belong to you. You showed me how to live sober. I don't think drinking's my problem. I think trying to find a way to live without drinking has been my problem. I never could figure that. I still haven't figured that out, by the way. If you come to me and want to know how to do that, all I can tell you is what old Bob White said one time. There's 2 ways guaranteed to stay sober, to not get drunk. Don't swallow or hit a cop. And both of those are a little drastic, aren't they? I started drinking because that's what you do. If you were born in Denver, and I was, and you were raised on East Colfax, and I was, at a certain point in time, there's a rite of passage. We got a guy from Lowry Air Force Base to buy us a quart of whiskey, bonded bourbon, went out east of Denver to drink it and get drunk and have fun. The big guy says, if you drink it, you get drunk, you have fun. And I'm always up for that. I found a description of what happened to me in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It was written by Carl Jung, one of the finest psychiatrists in the world. He's describing a spiritual awakening. He says essentially, ideas and conceptions that used to rule the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and an entire new set of conceptions begins to dominate them. That's exactly what alcohol did to me. It has left me with a conclusion. I suffer from soul sickness. I've always known the answer would be spiritual for me, but I was a spiritual thief. I thought being spiritual meant you felt good all the time. You new people, if you want a measure of insanity, that's it. The belief that I'm supposed to feel good all the time. Okay. I pursued that for a while. A wonderful thing happened. I went into that evening stupid and short and really ugly and weird and angry and frightened. Hell, I was only 15, for goodness sakes. And I had a couple drinks of that bonded bourbon, and all of a sudden, I had plans. Oh, they were good, too. Yeah. So there was a guy in my high school class that hadn't been treating me very well. And I was going to meet him back at the drive-in and whip him. And I could have done it. Probably without even breathing hard. And there was a little girl in my class that hadn't been treating me at all. And she and I were going to have a visit. And I anticipated breathing a little hard. Now, those aren't bad plans. That's not a bad thing. Something that will bring a misfit like me into the heart of life. It's not a bad deal at all. If that's all it did, I'd buy you a drink. But I didn't know that's also in my nature that if one works, take 10. That's visceral. I don't think that way. That's just who I am. If one works, take... Anything worth doing is worth abusing, for goodness sakes. Okay? And by the time I got back to the drive-in, instead of what those people were going to see, what they saw was me being hauled around the drive-in by the elbows, puking in the driveway. And that's how I drank, with minor variations along the way. But that's how I drank. It was 4 years before I could even smell bonded bourbon without gagging. And I have talked to non-alcoholic people who, having had an experience like that, don't drink anything at all again. They're weird, but I like them. They're nice. I found out what wouldn't make me so sick so quick. Now, my keen alcoholic mind understood clearly what the problem had been. Bonded bourbon. I've never had bonded bourbon since that day. I'm convinced today that if that's all there was, that's what I'd have drank. But liquor's too easy to get. And I entered into what I found again in the big book, the description of alcoholism. See, the great gift you gave to me is that you took me in hand and told me what an alcoholic was, because I didn't know I was one. And then you helped me bring my own memories to that, so I could say, oh, I am one of those. Then I must have this thing. I drank for effect. Everybody drinks for effect. But I learned some things early on before liquor turned on me. If we were going to fight tonight, I would drink vodka. Because when I drink vodka, I get mean. And if you're going to fight, you might as well be a little bit mean. I also get drunk and get whipped. If we were going to go to a dance, and there might be girls there, I like dark Bacardi rum. It makes me sensitive. and warm. I'm a good listener. Oh, God. And I get drunk. I can remember early on, one of the horrors of alcoholism for me was when I couldn't feel anything. And I could drink Coors beer and listen to Jim Reeves and Ferlin Husky singing things like Four Walls, and I could cry like a baby. It was part of life again. I loved Mogan David red wine. It makes me a poet. And I paint. I get artistic. And I play good trumpet behind Mogan David red wine for 10 minutes, and then I get sick. I really like Japanese Akadama wine. You can get so drunk on that the next morning when you drink water, it starts all over again. You've been there. I see the heads going. I was in my first federal penitentiary when I was 19 years old, not because I was a big-time gangster, but because of alcoholism. And I didn't know why that had happened until you told me. I found that in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's why I went. When I drink alcohol, I get lost, and I can't find my way home. And when you're in the Navy, that's a felony. Hey, I love the Navy. I had, for the noblest reasons of all, to save America from the communist menace, I had left my beloved high school when I was 17 and joined the Navy to go to war. The truth was, I'd been kicked out of my beloved high school for missing classes because my friend Larry and I had discovered that it was much more fun to drive up and down East Colfax drinking beer looking for girls. And we figured the system is really stupid because we were hall monitors. We kept attendance, and they didn't miss us for 17 days. I had to get out of Denver. It had gotten too small. I desperately needed to be somebody's hero. I wanted to come back with badges. And, you see, I didn't know who I was, and I needed somebody to tell me, and I really wasn't liking what you all were telling me. And I needed to go somewhere and come back with medals on my chest. I can tell you what it sounded like. I'd walk down the street casually, and I would hear it. There he is. That's him. He lets me talk to him. He's my friend. Would you like to meet him? and I'd stroll a little bit slower so they wouldn't have to run. And instead, I'm in a federal penitentiary in Tokyo, Japan. About the time you should have been saying that. And you taught me why. In the book Alcoholics Anonymous, Dr. Selfworth describes clearly why I went to the penitentiary. I suffer from an allergy to alcohol, and its symptom is if I drink alcohol, I break out with a craving for more alcohol. If I was allergic to tomatoes and ate tomatoes, I'd break out with an itch. My itch is more alcohol. And once I start, I cannot stop. I have lost the power of choice. It's over. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether I love my family or my work or myself or anything. It has to do with the fact that I've had a drink now, and I got to have another drink. And so I took a drink in Long Beach, California on a 24-hour liberty. And 23 days later, woke up in Pershing Square in Los Angeles. I'm not talking about not remembering that 23 days. I remember it to this day with horror. Because I was a really decent human being, but during that 23 days, whatever I had to do to get a drink, I did, or I thought about doing. And I woke up, meaning that the craving on day 23, when I woke up, was gone. And I woke up to the fact that I'm a decent human being and I need to get back to my ship. And I turned myself in and went back. And was baffled. I love the word baffled in the big book. It's my favorite word. That's a lifestyle. I've just done everything I thought I heard you say I should do so this would work. It didn't work. Part of the problem is that my timing is terrible. And I have this ego. I wanted to be a Boy Scout. Failed tenderfoot 3 times. I'm the kind of Boy Scout, however, that will help you across the street and not ask you if you want to go. I've never heard the whole message. And all those feelings come up and I drank. I drank to stop feelings. I drank to have feelings. I drank to be tall, to be short. I drank for all the reasons that you can think of. The horror of alcoholism, if you are one, is more often than not, I drank for no reason whatsoever. I just drank. And then I discovered amphetamines when I was 19. And found out they gave me a way to drink better and longer and with control. I still fell down, but they were controlled falls. If you haven't been around one, it's a joy to be around a quick drunk. You need to know, because I'm not going to spend much time on it, I'm also one of the freaks that came out of Berkeley in the 60s, throwing Alzey's acid around, screaming out, where there's dope, there's hope, burn down City Hall. We tried, but I am not a drug addict. And the only reason I say that is that if you are here today and you're an alcoholic, find out what you are all the way. Some of you are alcoholic and drug addict, and you really are. Some are alcoholics that have had a drug problem. Some are drug addicts who have an alcohol problem. Please find out. The 12 steps will work for anybody, but they have to have a foundation in truth. It must be founded on truth. And I spent the time to find out. I don't talk about it from here, but if anybody wants to talk about what I found out about me, I'd be glad to. I'm sure enough an alcoholic. No question about that. But I didn't know that. Christmas week of 1967, I was on federal parole for a little mistake I'd made in 1966. I was raising my 2 little boys. Their mother had abandoned ship when, let's see, Terry was, oh God, voices coming out of the air again. I thought I was over that. Come on, honey, I lost it. Where was I? Yeah, Terry was 2.5 and Sean was 1. And their mother had gone, and I was into that time where I was raising 2 little boys, single parent, homeless before it was even fashionable. And I was also into the tail end of my alcoholism. I had tried to be super straight, super freak, and bounced a lot through the years. And I'd gotten past the point where it was ever even conceivable to me that I could ever be normal or right or straight. And we were just surviving now on the streets. For the last 4.5 years of my alcoholism, we ran around the country. I found in the book Alcoholics Anonymous why. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. Looking for relief. But and I don't know to this day the Freudian reason why. All I can tell you is I was restless, irritable, and discontented. Today I'm so calm, I'm disgusting. I'm boring. No? I love this lady. She thinks I'm the cutest thing that ever happened. And I agree. What happened to me that week is simply that I ran out of lies. The truth did not get me sober. I just ran out of lies. And I didn't have very many of them left. I'd long ago lost the ability to differentiate between the true and the false, but my conscience was killing me. I have always known the difference between right and wrong, and that was killing me. Because I kept doing the wrong thing and could never get around to doing the right thing. It just was killing me. But I was down to just a few lies. And one of those was, these kids and I are okay. We have a place to live, we have food, we're okay. Don't mess with us. And this week I looked around our house and I could see the lie. See, I was on federal parole. I don't know why they're giving them back to me. We were on aid to dependent children because I couldn't work. I weighed 133 pounds and I hit that place where I couldn't get out of bed until I got a shot of speed so I could get up to go steal something, to get some booze, to get calmed down and go back to bed. It was a terrible time. There was nothing else in life. And our welfare check hadn't gotten there, so we didn't have a Christmas tree. I looked around. Our place was a pig pen. It was just a pig pen. Now, Christmas tree was important. I come from a functional home. Now, I apologize for that, but I do. There's times I don't feel I fit in AA anymore. And all I mean by that is that my family is still intact. My folks are both still alive. Until 3 weeks ago when we had to put Dad in a home because he has to be in a home. They live together. They still talk to each other. They still love one another. My little brother is probably one of the finest synthesizer musicians in the world. He just got back from a trip to Sweden and Russia because they wanted to find out what it is that he does. He's a professor of music at the University of Colorado, writes a symphony every year for the Colorado Symphony. Was writing with Stan Kenton when he was 19. Was a booker for the Army Band when he was 21. Hell, he lived right down the hall from me. My little sister, a few years back, retired from IBM as one of their top executives. She made big money and great babies. And her babies have been busy making babies. We're a prolific bunch. Her babies, because some of you guys are just lunatics, have not been able to find good husbands to go with the babies. But in my family, the whole attitude has always been, isn't that nice? There's another little Pritts baby, let's raise it. And we do. So my family faced all the problems. As I grew up, there was a period of time when my grandfather was the Grand Kleagle of the Colorado Ku Klux Klan and Dad was his second. So I had some funky ideas during that period. They both changed. It would never occur to them to do that again. So I grew up in a home where this was all going on. The one thing that nobody could deal with was Don. If you had asked me, or if you asked me today, to make a list of all the characteristics of the family I wish I'd have been brought up in, that's the one I got brought up in. And I lay in bed 13 years old crying. When are my people going to get back from outer space and pick me up? That's what it felt like. I don't belong here. I'd been listening to human beings talk and it wasn't me. That isn't how I felt. I grew up on streets where they said you're not supposed to ever be afraid. And I was terrified every bleeding minute. And couldn't show it to anybody. Terrified. I knew every morning when I woke up something is going to happen today. And when it does, you're going to blame me for it. Well, it isn't all that much different today. When I wake up in the morning, I know something is about to happen. And I want to be there. The feeling isn't all that different. It's just the attitude. Well, anyway, we didn't have a Christmas tree. Didn't have any money. But being restless, we walked a lot. And on the 24th, on our little stroll, we found $1 in the snow. And went to the Christmas tree lot and found out you can have the biggest tree on the lot for $1 on the 24th. And I'm alcoholic. I bought the big one. And it didn't fit the room. Ceiling's about 7 foot. The tree's about 9 foot, so it tilted over at the top. And we dressed it with garbage. And my heart was beginning to break, the hardness around it, because that wasn't right. Had 2 little presents under it. I'd managed to talk to a place called the Public Merchandise Mart in Denver out of a little pair of cowboy boots and a little shirt, so each of the boys would have a present. My little boys had wrapped up everything that would fit in blue paper towel and put it under the tree for me. And I started to die. Thank God. Christmas Day, we went down to my folks' place. Now, these are people who face everything. To spend the day with them, and my dad met us at the door and he said, "Don, I'm sorry, but your mother said I can't let you in here anymore. She can't stand watching you die." And I woke up. I saw the lie. I would have told you that day and really believed it. Leave me the hell alone. I'm not hurting anybody but me. And suddenly I can see I'm hurting everybody. The folks, the kids, the bums I run with, it was just clear that was a lie. And then my dad destroyed my last lie because he snuck us into the basement. And I was still hanging on to the idea that nobody loves us, nobody cares. And he made a lie out of it that day, and I could see it. When there's no lies left, all that's left is self-pity. And I went home with a truckload of it. And I walked past the self-pity into the truth. And the truth that day, I must tell you, was that there was no good reason for me to be here. There really wasn't. It was the truth. Everybody'd be better off, including my kids, in a foster home rather than living with me. My God, the year before, they had been part of a federal narcotics raid on my house, where they break down the front door and the back door and the side windows and pull guns and just do terrible things. And my little boys are sitting there, and one of them almost got shot. Anything would be better for my kids than me. And I knew that. I believe that the absolute rock bottom of all human pain is the moment you know you are useless. And that moment I was useless. And I had nothing left to surrender to. You must surrender at that point. Now, if I sponsor you and you ain't there, don't pick me for a sponsor. I'm not a sponsor who will take away your pain. I'll push you to the edge because I have an answer for you when you get there. Okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't do that. Truth without love is cruelty. And confrontation without a real answer is brutality. But we love you, and we have a real answer. And I love you enough to tell you the truth. Anyway, I got off the subject. I had nothing left to surrender to, so I did the only thing I could do. I took a 2-month supply of the garbage I was using, and I pushed it up my arm, and I drank everything in the house, and I laid down and died. And I believe I died that day, and I'm so glad. So I haven't had a drink since. New guy got out of bed. Didn't want to get out of bed. When I woke up the next morning, I didn't feel good. The police were at the door. I knew I wasn't dead. And there wasn't anything left. I'm now in a body that won't die, carrying with it a mind that won't work. Okay. A complete failure at living and a complete failure at dying. God. And I was taken away. They had 9 charges. The first one called for 3 years to life. DA promised me he'd bring the rest of them one at a time if I beat that one, but I was through. And then I owed the feds 5 years on top of that. And I really didn't care. I was just bone weary tired. I was willing now to go anywhere anybody said and do anything anybody said if it meant I didn't have to be me anymore. And I laid in the Denver County Jail in detox for about 6 weeks. And I don't want to ever go through that again, and I don't want to ever forget it. I don't believe it'd keep me sober. I have had worse detoxes. They didn't keep me sober. But that one makes me a really good sponsor. Oh yeah. I laid in that cell and pounded on my legs and on my head and just went through whatever for 6 weeks. So if you come to me at 5 weeks and say, I'm going to die, I can look you right in the eye and say, not yet. Hang on, we got a week to go, kid. Thank God nobody's gone past 6 weeks so far. Let me tell you about power. This is all about power, you know. Powerlessness is my problem. Finding the power is what it's about. And the power entered my life before I ever heard the name God, before I ever heard about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm convinced of that because with what was going on, on the day I came to trial, they took me in a room with my attorney and said, we've been talking to the federal people, and we all think you're really sick. And I agreed. They said, we've struck a deal. If you plead guilty to a reduced charge so we don't have to have this messy trial, we'll give you a 1.5-year sentence, suspend it, and give you back to the feds, and they'll take you to Fort Worth, Texas, to that hospital and fix what's wrong with you. And I signed the paper. I'm a drunk, not an idiot. And I went to court. They changed my age to 17 so I could qualify. I don't know what's going to happen when Social Security comes. I'm much younger than I look. If you know about power, you know that when the state of Colorado and the federal government says Don goes from Denver to Fort Worth, Texas, that's where Don goes. 5 days later, I was in the fish tank at the Colorado State Penitentiary. Because the guy who made the deal at the last minute changed his mind, and I've talked with him, he has no idea, but he changed his mind. He said, this one's too sick, we can't help him. See, I was certified by one group as a sociopath 2, type 2, whatever that is. One said I was a psychopath, and the psychiatrist said I was a manic depressive drug addict. And I knew I just didn't feel good. So we can't help him. Just put him away so it didn't hurt himself or somebody else. And so I am in the fish tank, and I'm forever grateful. You came looking for me. I did not know I needed you. Didn't have a clue. Nobody had any idea that alcohol was my problem. I had disguised it with all these other behaviors. And I would tell you new people, please, dear God, understand, the drama does not define alcoholism. Alcoholism is defined so simply if, when you start to drink, you find you cannot control the amount you drink, or if when you wish to stop entirely you find you can't, you're probably alcoholic. And all the drama is just excess baggage we use to keep each other amused so that you don't get pissed at your $20 registration. In our third week, we were laying in our cells, and I can still hear the voice. The guard said, you people will come down and you will listen. And I did the first sane thing in my life. I went down and I listened. And you all watch us this weekend, those of us who are talking, you think this is a big deal. I have to agree with Sean. This is no big deal. This is easy. Talking is easy. Listening is what's hard. And if you want to stay sober, learn to listen. God has made a listener of me. And I went down that day and I listened. And what I heard was they had 3 guys with numbers on their chests, smiling. I got to tell you, inmates in their natural habitat, in their natural clothing, are a little intimidating. Smiling inmates are absolutely terrifying. And these 3 were smiling. It was that smile that says, I know something you don't know, and you better learn it quick, or you're dead. And I could anyway, this guy got up and he said, my name is Doc, and I'm an alcoholic. And that means that I'm powerless over alcohol and guards and drugs and all of the other circumstances of my life. And my life has become unmanageable. And if any of you smart bastards think you can still manage your lives, look at the reward the state just gave you for the nifty job you've been doing. And the miracle was that I heard him. I heard him. They gave us some really important information. He said, your very best thinking got you to the penitentiary. You're not doing too good, are you? Woo! Well, that's where I was, and I promise you I've been doing my very best. I understand clearly today, standing before you, my very best thinking on my own puts me in confinement. So I don't trust this thing any further. In fact, I unhooked it. Oh yeah. On its own, it's the only use it has is that I can drag it out and parade it in front of you, and you can say, that looks surprisingly like mine. I thought I was the only one who thought that way. But once we get that done, it's really, really important to have a sponsor who knows when it's time to put it away. Okay? An unaided alcoholic mind is a dangerous thing. We weren't allowed to go to meetings. My story's a little different because we weren't allowed to go to meetings. I think meetings are really, really, really important. And I'm emphasizing that because what I'm about to tell you got fed back to me as somebody saying, Don says you don't have to go to meetings. Not so. I go to 25 or 30 meetings a week. Oh yeah. Anytime 2 or more alcoholics are gathered together for the purpose of sobriety, that's AA. And I have my home group, and I don't hardly ever miss that. And I go to a couple other meetings because I go trolling. I come from the old school. Our job is to go find alcoholics that don't know if you're alcoholic you don't have to drink, and most of them are in an AA meeting somewhere. So we go trolling. I sponsor 4 and 5 people at a time, which means 4 or 5 times a week. Somebody's at my house at 6:30 in the morning, and we're going through the big book. That's a meeting. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been to probably 15 meetings since I've been here. We sat and talked about sobriety. Formal meetings are really important. But I do not believe in my heart that just going to meetings alone would keep me sober. I just don't believe it. I believe without meetings I will surely drink. But I'm fortunate. I got involved in the recovery process with the people, with the real spirit of this business from the very beginning. We weren't allowed to go to meetings. We had to spend 5 weekends in what was known as a 12-step study school before you were allowed to go to a meeting. We had 1 meeting a week. They let real people in from the outside, and I really wanted to go. And I'm going to make a little pitch for institutions. Some of you are sitting here wondering, what do I have to offer in a prison? I've never been there. That's what you have to offer. I got a lot of information from my convict sponsors, but they didn't know how to stay out either. I really needed to talk to somebody who'd never been there. You taught me some of the most important spiritual lessons I've ever learned, by the way. You regular folks? You want money? Oh, get a job. Go to it. After you got it, show up. While you're there, You might even want to consider working. At the end of the week, if you'll do your part, an automatic things happen. They'll give you some money. It won't be enough, but it'll be enough. Are you tired of being arrested? Quit going where there's cops. You know where they are? They're in stores that are supposed to be closed, but they found open. Yeah. You all know where they are. I had a wonderful experience a couple weeks ago with the FBI. I got to tell you about it. It's wonderful. About 3 months ago, I got notified by my bank in Denver. I spent 11 years in a specialty roofing business before I went to the Carolinas to work in corrections. My bank notified me that the grand jury had subpoenaed all my bank records. Now, that doesn't frighten me. Any thorough examination of my bank records will show is that this man needed a keeper. Okay? That he doesn't belong in business for himself. That's what it'll show. And then my wife called me a few weeks after that and said, the FBI just called, and they'd like to talk to you. Well, that was kind of good news, because I wanted to talk to them too. I was curious as to what they wanted with my bank records. So I called the guy back long distance in Denver, and the agent said, I have never had such a fast response. It's only been 5 minutes. And we visited a bit. When you visit with the FBI, that means they ask you questions, and you tell them the truth. And I did that for a while with him. And then he said, well, you know, everybody I've talked to about this is telling me essentially the same story. What had happened, I had done a major roof for a businessman who they're investigating, because they put a couple banks out of business, I guess. Anyway, they wanted to make sure the money he paid me hadn't filtered back to him. They're just running a money trace. And this FBI man said to me, it was like a Christmas present. He said, well, everybody's telling me about the same thing. I guess I won't have to bother you anymore. Isn't that nice? I was smart enough not to say back to him, you're not bothering me now. But he wasn't. That's one of the gifts I've been given. I've nothing wrong.
This is the end of side one. Please turn to side two for the continuation of this program. Side two, audio portion will begin in a few moments.
What are they going to do to me? Lock me up? They told me what my disease was, and I began to identify as an alcoholic. And it was a little while. I was so caught up in the drug thing, I thought I was a drug addict. And it took a little time to work that out. But I began to find out I really was alcoholic. And I'm an alcoholic of the kind that is described in the big book. If you think you can recover on less than spiritual means, it depends on how seriously alcoholic you were. I am seriously alcoholic. There is no human means will ever be able to keep me sober. And I just know that. It's going to take more than that. And I was sponsored by 3 very spiritual men who said, it's all or nothing. And I watched them, and that's how I came to believe in the power of God. I watched it walking around. My original sponsor was doing a natural life sentence for a double murder he'd committed one morning when he was 17 years old in a shootout with the police. He'd killed a couple people on the street. The man telling me that story could not do that. And I knew it. He couldn't do that. And I asked him about it. He said, that's right, I've been changed. God changed me. Hell, I didn't care who changed him. He'd been changed, and all I came here for was to be changed. And I'm convinced to this day that this is all about change. If you're the same person 2 years from now as you are today sitting here, you'll probably drink again. There has to be change here. Still didn't trust him entirely. Phil Gutierrez taught me some lessons. Phil was a marvel. Phil was a Guamanian from Guam. Looked like an old Chinese pirate. Bad-looking dude. And Phil was a bad dude. He was doing some time there for throwing some people out of a 3-story window on his last drunk. But this man was the gentlest, kindest, most loving human being I've ever met. Phil was my hero. Phil was what I wished I could be. He taught me to touch in a penitentiary, where that's a little risky. But Phil's kind of touching was never, ever questioned by anybody. See, Phil knew something about us. We're not hip, slick, and cool. We're not smart. The gift that God has given us in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's a pure gift and it's a real gift, is the gift of healing. We are healers. He sends us the sickest people on the planet and says, they're yours. Show them how to heal. Don't make them smart. Don't make them slip. Help them heal. And so I want to be a good healer. And so I started watching healers. What do healers do? My wife's a healer. She works with babies, and I've watched her. She picks them up and she pats them. And she says things like, you're in the right place. You stay with us, you'll be all right. They don't know the words, but she rocks them and pats them and talks to them. Sounds similar to me, to what we do. I got to thinking about the great healer one time. He'd walk along the road and he'd come upon some guy who was down there blind and crippled and covered with sores and desperately alone. Now he knew something that we know. This guy thought he was alone because he was blind and crippled and covered with sores. The great healer knew that he was blind and crippled and covered with sores because he thought he was alone. And so what would he do? He'd reach out and touch him and say, hey, is anybody there? Once you touch someone, they can't be alone, and they can hate you for touching them. But they can't be alone. And this is the lonely disease. And what do we do when they come to us? First thing, we stick out our hand and we touch them. We grab them by the elbow. In some places, we hug them. And we hug them anyway. And then he would say to them, hey, you don't have to do this anymore. And what do we say to them? You don't have to drink anymore. And we get the same response out of drunks that I'm sure he got. Huh? I didn't know. I know people have said for years to me, you better quit drinking. And I said, oh, I'd love to. How do you do that? And so on and so on, huh? Yeah, he'd say, if you don't want to do this anymore, just tell me, do you want to stop this? And if they said yes, he would say, okay, stop this. Oh, would you like to get up? Oh, yeah. Okay, get up. And we don't do a whole lot more than that, do we? We really don't. We walk day by day with the new people and keep waking them up. Well, anyway, they did all this stuff for me. I've only got a few minutes left, and there's some really important things I want to share with you. I was hand-carried through the steps. When I came to the third step, I had a sponsor who was an absolute joy. He loved me more than he loved himself, I think, because he took me to the very edge. He did not give me a new concept of God. He destroyed all of my old ones. And they all had to do with Santa Claus. You know, what's he going to do for me? And I had none left, and I can remember screaming at him, you're asking me to turn my life over to the care of nothing. And he said, well, why not? Nothing can run it better than you've been doing it. You know, he's one of those kind. After a phony inventory, if you're new, don't worry about, can I do this right? You can't. Can't do it wrong either. We ended up back with him, as he described. I'd gone to my cell and said the third step prayer with all the earnestness in my little old heart. And then I sat back to wait for my flash of light, knowing that I would be transformed and my green clothes would turn white, and they'd call me and say, okay, Pritts, you can go home now. We don't need you here anymore. And absolutely nothing happened. Nothing. And I'm alcoholic, and that's unbearable pain. You know, if that wall falls that way, only the people sitting against it are going to even respond to it. The rest of us can handle it. It's just a crisis. What the hell? But nothing happened. And so I went back and complained. I went to him with the alcoholic war cry on my lips. Where's mine? That can't be mine. It's not big enough. That can't be mine. It's the wrong color. Where's mine? There's not enough of it. My sponsor said, you dummy, you ought to be grateful you didn't have a flashing light. They've nearly killed you all your life. And we began to discuss them. Southern Comfort on a roof in Phoenix, Arizona in September will give you a flash of light. I had a vision eating peyote with the Indians in Nevada at an Easter meeting one time. Great bird flying high with no head, and I understood that's me and my life, flying high going nowhere. Kept me sober 4 months. We are promised a new mind. In fact, it's suggested by Dr. Silkworth, if we don't have an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of recovery. I got to have a new mind. My old one's too badly broken. There's too many pieces missing. I got to have a whole new way of thinking about things and looking at life. My sponsor carried me into mine because he loved me. I had one final reservation. I was convinced that if I truly surrendered to God all the way, he'd put me on the corner of Colfax and Broadway in Denver handing out Watchtower magazines and asking strangers, have you been saved, brother? And I couldn't see me doing that. I had this plush apartment in cell B49 right, and life was good. My sponsor said, oh, well, let's talk about that. And for you new people, that's sponsor talk. It doesn't mean let us talk about that. Okay? You don't have any part of the discussion. He said to me, the greatest love words I've ever heard. He said, Don, do you suppose that the guy down there at Colfax and Broadway today, handing out Watchtower magazines, had breakfast where he wanted to? And I said, probably. And he said, you didn't. Do you suppose that that man that's making a fool of himself down there is wearing clothes he picked out to do it in? And I said, probably. And he said, you're not. Do you suppose when he's all through that he gets to go home? And of course I didn't. What he did was carry me into my new mind and laid the foundation. And the foundation is simple. Anything at all that God may have in mind for me is better than anything at all that I will ever have in mind for me, and that's the deal. And I've been living that way for 27 years now, and I'm imperfect at it, but that is how I live. And the contrasts are incredible to me. When I ran my life, I lived in an 8x10 toilet. My children were in a foster home. My people wouldn't see me on Christmas Day. Lord, since I gave it up and just started saying yes to everything, as long as it comes from you, I've been all over the world. You have given me some treasured gifts. I've been all over the United States and Canada. You sent me to Guatemala and to Puerto Rico. In 1988, you allowed me to go to Russia and Estonia on your behalf. Look where I am today. It was West Palm Beach, Florida. Wonderful place. But if I'd have made a list of where I want to go in my life, you guys wouldn't have been on it. And that's not because it's a bad place. It would have never have occurred to me to come to the PGA Resort in West Palm. It would never have occurred to me. And that's what I like about living with God as my director. He thinks up stuff I would never think of. Okay? This lady over here is sane. There is no way I would have ever even looked for one sane. I almost didn't marry her. Being in love with her wasn't enough. It took more than that. Let me tell you something amazing. I'm going to talk just a minute or two about some gifts. Here's a gift I've been given. We have been married a little over 18 years without a fight. That's a gift. We don't always agree, but it is agreed that if I start yelling, I'm wrong. That's not an agreement she made. Me and God talked about that one time. She has 2 darling daughters, my daughters. I had 2 teenage louts, and she had this 5-year-old and 3-year-old, and I almost missed them. And I promised Kelly I'd tell you about a couple things with her. Love is a gift from God, and it comes through His people. Okay? This little girl, bless her heart, she has been a thorn in my side. I have a mouthy one. She's not afraid of me. What a gift in a family. My children are not afraid of me. That does not always make me comfortable, by the way. My children are definitely smarter than me. She had an occasion one time to write a little deal on her dad in school. And her real dad is a Denver detective. And she picked me instead. She wrote 6 or 7 pages of some of the neatest stuff I've ever read. Ever read. But the last paragraph rocked me. She said, if I'd have had a choice, I would have picked Don for my dad. But I didn't have a choice. So God picked him and brought him to me. So that's how I feel about you. I didn't have a choice. So God brought you to me. One morning, these girls gave me a marvelous experience. I had gotten meditation down to an art, and this morning meditation was incredible. I wasn't walking, I was just kind of floating through the house. And I don't know if you've been around little girls much, but when they get on the peck, their mouths are awful. And Lisa said something to Kelly that sounded like, and Kelly responded with, and I did a really stupid thing. I said, don't do that. And I didn't know at the time, but that's little girl talk for, oh, Dad wants in the game. So the volume went up. And I started touching the floor. And I hollered, knock it off out there. Which means in little girl talk, we've got him now. They went berserk, and I went berserk. In my home, because the spiritual life calls for solitude and privacy, doors are really important. If yours is closed, we won't mess with you. I said, get to your rooms. And they were laughing as they ran up the stairs to their rooms and went in and slammed the doors. And I leaped in one bound. I was at the top of the stairs screaming out, if we're going to slam them, we're not going to have them. And I'm taking the doors off the hinges. And they went on to school. I hauled these heavy doors with my righteous anger down to the basement. I got to the basement, and one of the things I got to warn you about is if you start asking God for help way back here, you get it whether you want it or not. And the voice came to my mind, you dummy. You got to carry these doors all the way back up, rehang them, and then when those little girls get home, you've got to apologize for being such a jerk. And I hadn't even done anything. So I did what I'd been taught. Whatever separated me from those children was separating me from God, and there was some aspect of self involved here, and it was brutally simple and ugly. They were making noise in my house. How dare they disrupt my sanctuary? And that's all there was to that. They lived there too. And I cleared that away and started praying for an answer, and I got one. When they start doing that now, I send myself to my room. It's just a lot easier. That was for you, Alan. I'll tell you about my little brother, and then we'll go do whatever we're going to do next. The making of amends has been the most important thing in my life. The end result of making amends is doubly important right now because, as I said about 3 weeks ago, we had to put my dad in a home. We're losing him. And he won't be with us much longer, and I don't know how much longer Mom's going to stick around when he goes. But I know that's inevitable. One of the things I know, because I'm a spiritual being and understand it, is that folks come and folks go, and some folks stay longer than others. And that's all I know for sure. When I mentioned I'm a spiritual being, I thought I was a human being trying to have a spiritual experience, and I discovered I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, which means I'm really human. I'm not afraid of the human experience. If I'm one of God's kids, I'm a spiritual being. It also means nothing else works for me. The making of amends, the setting straight the crooked path, the getting square with the world has been the most important activity of my sobriety, next to talking with new drunks. And it even falls in with that. I have an obligation to pass back what I was given. Some of those amends I got cleared quickly. The stuff with my folks is really important. When we put Dad in the home, it broke my heart to walk off, park the wheelchair and walk off. But it was just the normal heartbreak. See, I don't ever have to stand at my dad's grave and say, I wish I'd have said this, Pop. Or anybody else's. I'm clean. If I get nothing else out of this deal, I'm clean. I'll screw something up tomorrow, but you taught me I can straighten it up tomorrow too, right away. I want to stay clean. In staying clean, my little brother, bless his heart, was about 22 years before he could really feel comfortable with me, a long time before he'd even talk to me. I did him some grave harm. I hurt our name. We live in the same town, and there's only one Pritts family in the town. And I damaged our name, and that damaged him. And I harmed our parents, and that hurt him because he loved them. And I made a shambles out of our life, our name. And that bothered him. And there's nothing I could ever do to square that, except get my own life in order. So I never tried to impress him. I just got my own life in order. I was about 22 years sober, and he invited my wife over for dinner for his birthday. First time ever. We went. He said at the end of that meeting, he said, Don, I don't know if you and I will ever be friends, but tonight was pleasant. We can do this again. And we began opening that door. I'm going to tell you about a gift, the greatest gift I've been given. One of the ways I made amends to my parents, because I was disappeared for long periods of time. They didn't know where the kids and I were. On a regular basis, I go by and let them see I'm okay. Mom said one time all she wanted was for me to be happy. So I go by and show her I'm happy. Regularly. I've been in the Carolinas for 2 years because one of my messengers came by and said, let's go to the Carolinas. Learn to listen for your messengers. Don't listen to mine. You may not want to go to the Carolinas. But the upshot of that is that whenever I got home on a visit, I always went by to see the folks. And I was sitting visiting with them, and Roy and I just had done a few things together, not much. And I was sitting there with my leg crossed over, and he walked in and sat down, and all of a sudden he reached out and kicked me on the bottom of the shoe. And he said, I'm really glad to see you. And he really, truly was. He said, look, next time you're in town, why don't you and I go up to the cabin? We've got a little cabin up above Bailey. We'll do a little fishing and fooling around. And, of course, the next time in town, that's where we went. We didn't catch any fish. We stomped around beaver ponds and got wet. Went back to the cabin and played cribbage. And I'm honest in every aspect of my life except games. And I don't cheat. I'm just devious. I didn't remind him that cribbage is an institution game. What I told him was that, it has been a long time since I played that, Roy. You will probably have to teach me how to count again and what the cards mean. I cleaned up on him. It was brutal. He has since learned how because he cleaned me last time. But in the midst of that, we started to visit. We talked with each other. And my little brother gave me the most precious gift. He gave me that deepest part of himself, what he thought about himself. He said, Don, I'm 58 years old now, and I believe I've made a decent contribution to life. Whew. You don't just tell that to anybody. I was his hero, and I destroyed it. But I'm his hero again. That's what he told me. And he gave me a gift beyond measure. I have prayed and searched and read and prodded in my mind for years to find a way to tell you all how I feel about you and how much I love you. Well, I'm 61. And because of you, I've made a decent contribution.
You have reached